always need uncrewed systems to team up with traditional vessels such as frigates. So I don't see a future with navies predominantly characterized by unmanned systems from Spain, Italy, Greece, France, Germany, the UK, Norway. They are all acquiring frigates and submarines, and this testifies the importance of those platforms. I would stress the fact that it's a team-up approach. Hello, hi, welcome. Thank you for having me today. I'm Giovani Rasio, Senior Defence Analyst at Shephard Group's Defence Insight. We have definitely witnessed growth in the market, both due to the growing threats that most of the, let's say, Western countries are facing. So that has increased the pace of modernization efforts that in most cases were already in place. So, for example, if we think about Northern Europe, but also in the southern flank, and on other times, it has triggered the acquisition and the development of new capabilities across most of NATO countries. So yeah, absolutely. The kind of threat scenario that the countries and the navies around the world are facing or will be required to face in the near future are definitely influencing the development and acquisition trajectories of the navies. So on the one hand, if we think about what's going on in the Red Sea and therefore the renewed interest and the need to acquire new capabilities in the realm of anti-air weapon systems, considering the threat that the Houthis have posed in the Red Sea, and therefore the needs to provide escort to a number of commercial vessels, but also to provide protection to the warship from an aerial point of view. And on the other hand, if we think about the kind of renewed interest and increased interest in the acquisition of ASW assets, especially if we think about the Atlantic or the Mediterranean as well, with the presence of Russian submarines, this has definitely pushed countries, especially in Northern Europe, as I said, to acquire new ASW capabilities, on top of the modernization programs and plans that were agreed even before the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. And another element that is definitely affecting the procurement strategies of most countries is the manning issue that is affecting in particular navies. So not having enough manpower to crew ships and submarines is pushing navies to explore new solutions and opportunities. And let's say a very direct answer to this could be the acquisition of unmanned or autonomous or remotely operated systems. And we can see a number of initiatives around Europe. Most of them have started in the arena of the mine countermeasure systems, which historically, for obvious reasons, have always somehow relied on that kind of element, therefore on remotely operated systems. So European countries in particular are still approaching that procurement sphere from that perspective, but there's obviously a need to expand that approach towards other areas in terms of intelligence, surveillance and recognition, and ASW in general. So I think what we have seen, for example, in the air domain with the expansion of the use of unmanned systems, we are at the beginning of somehow the same process that might be different, obviously, for other reasons, but in the naval warfare as well. The Russian submarine threat has been, let's say, and not historical threat, but the submarine component has been one of the strongest part of the Russian Navy and one of the cornerstone of their doctrine and strategy. especially thinking about the nuclear deterrent. So submarines cover a very important role in the Navy. And for countries like the UK and Norway, with the Duke Gap in the North Atlantic, that's the corridor where basically Russian submarines can access the Atlantic from the Kola Peninsula and Murmansk, where there's the main base of the North Fleet of the Russian Navy, and therefore it's of vital importance to monitor them with a sort of persistent engagement in the Atlantic and also in the Mediterranean, that historically has been the corridor for them to move smaller submarines from the Baltic Sea especially up till the Black Sea, and some of them are obviously still there. And NATO countries in general have started to take some action, both with new surface assets such as frigates that are the backbones of the measures that can be taken to monitor and track and counter potentially submarines. And obviously we have the submarine component itself, but the ASW element, the anti-submarine warfare, has a network approach. So it requires a global and kind of wide engagement that involves surface assets, submarines, and aerial assets as well. So it's a big effort that needs to be complemented by a wide range of sensors too. So it's a long process. Submarines have very long procurement and construction timeline for inherent reasons related to the construction of hulls and pressurized hulls. Frigates are slightly easier to build, but obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the unmanned component will definitely help on this side of things with the introduction of platforms that will be capable of persistently engage in the areas. So, for example, in the UK, the Royal Navy around the end of February has released an industry engagement notice for the so-called Project CABOT. Project CABOT basically aims to develop a whole new family of uncrewed, remotely operated, autonomous system to therefore deliver a deployable and persistent wide area ASW capability for the Atlantic. So that's connected to what we discussed earlier. And the reason for that is that the UK has always had, and the Royal Navy, a strong interest in ASW, but obviously the presence and the engagement in the anti-submarine warfare domain that the Royal Navy has been able to provide lately has been limited by the number of submarines available and the manning issue that we mentioned earlier, and therefore the Navy has been forced to look for alternatives and other solutions. There's also there was another initiative called the ASW Spearhead Initiative, which is a 7-year-long project that had a budget of around £400 million that basically helped the development of platforms such as the Proteus, which is a rotary wing unmanned aerial system that is currently, if I'm not wrong, developed by Leonardo. And then we have the HERN or Cetus XL UUV, which is an extra large underwater uncrewed system. So that's the aim of Project CABOT, to capitalize on that. It's divided in 2 phases. Phase 1 will basically aim in around a couple of years, so it's a very strict timeline, to have manufacturer-owned and manufacturer-operated system. And then the second phase has the target of having the Royal Navy operating his own systems. Obviously, that one is more long-term, but that's the end goal of the whole project, to develop this family of uncrewed systems, whether they are autonomous or remotely operated, so that they can team up with the traditional platforms and sensors, such as MPAs in the air, frigates and destroyers on the surface, and submarines under the water, to tackle that problem of having a persistent eye in the Atlantic. Yeah, so with regards to unmanned systems, France and the UK have a long-standing partnership regarding the development of new systems, and the companies involved in this are, in this case, Thales UK, Thales France, and L3 Harris. In continental Europe, other initiatives have been led by Thales and Exail, another French company, with regards to this joint cooperation program by Belgium and the Netherlands, who have recently acquired a few MCM vessels that will act as motherships of unmanned systems. So they will be delivered soon. A few vessels have already been launched in France. Follow-up units will be built in Romania and then outfitted in France. But the core of the unmanned systems is developed in France at the moment by Exail, and other countries are taking different approaches from this. As I said at the beginning, in Europe, the initial approach towards unmanned systems has been more towards the mine countermeasure missions. Now with the UK and the Royal Navy with Project CABOT, we are witnessing what potentially is going to be the step forward. But even within the arena of mine countermeasure missions, there are different approaches. Because, for example, if we look at what France, Belgium, and the Netherlands are doing with the usage of unmanned systems, they want to keep the man out of the minefield, let's say, and to task unmanned systems to do the job in the minefield, therefore keeping the mothership outside and relying on data link and communication through unmanned aerial systems as well to control the uncrewed vessels. Whereas, for example, Italy has taken a different approach, a kind of mixed one. So they will still be relying on unmanned systems, but the vessels they are building as motherships are not built in steel, but they are built in fiberglass, because they want to retain the opportunity to go inside the minefield with the mothership in case, I don't know, you are operating in an electronic warfare environment or a GPS contested environment, and therefore the deployability of those unmanned systems is at risk. They want to retain the opportunity to say, let's go in with the main ship. That is what's still be done as of now. So different approaches, still relying on unmanned systems, but with a different approach, as I said. Yeah, I think what we are witnessing, especially in the Middle East, is quite interesting from a procurement perspective and a market perspective, because we have witnessed, for example, a few European players teaming up with Middle Eastern realities by creating joint ventures. And in this case, I'm thinking about Fincantieri, the joint venture Mistral with Edge Group, or the recent joint venture between Edge and CMN Naval, the French, and then the Dutch Damen has created another joint venture called Dune with Al Seer Marine, again UAE based. So as a result probably of the of political decisions also made in the UAE that require a further localization of the production. European companies have started to take the first steps towards teaming up in a more structured way with UAE companies, and Mistral, the joint venture between Fincantieri and Edge, in 2024 was, for example, awarded a new deal for 10 OPVs for the UAE Coast Guard. CMN Naval has a long-standing relationship with Edge Group. For example, at IDEX 2023, they signed a deal with Angola. Edge Group signed a deal with Angola to supply corvettes, but the lead ship will be built in France, and the following vessels will be built in the UAE. And last but not least, the joint venture between Damen and Al-Sir Marine got awarded a contract for an undisclosed number of OPVs last week. So I believe that the same kind of model that we are seeing in the UAE will be somehow also applied to Saudi Arabia in the next few years. So big procurement programs by those countries, therefore a lot of funds and a lot of money that can be assigned to contracts potentially won by European entities, but that will require a high level of localization and production in the Middle East. Yes, the next one in the naval arena is IMDEX in Singapore at the beginning of May. I believe it's going to be an interesting one, because obviously the Asia Pacific is a very dynamic context at the moment. There's the local champion ST Engineering, who is quite active in the uncrewed part of the systems, but it's also building a new class of ships, 6 ships for the Singaporean Navy, who are probably the first, I would say, combatant motherships of drones. They have been built in collaboration with Saab and with OMT, the Danish shipbuilder, but they will effectively be some sort of frigates, but with the capability to operate a lot of unmanned systems. So we will see finally a combination in real terms between a combatant and the unmanned systems. And again, in the submarine domain, Singapore has recently outlined the need and the willingness to acquire further submarines of the Invincible class. They've just received a couple of platforms from TKMS. Those submarines are based on the Type 218. That is a sort of customized version for the export based on the Type 212 of the German and Italian Navy. And Singapore has expressed the interest to buy an extra 2 vessels that will bring the total submarine fleet to 6, which is quite remarkable and significant if we think about the size of the state of Singapore. But they have a formidable navy and air force, so I'm not surprised by the wish list that they have.
Well, they need to protect their trades, don't they?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's a very interesting topic, especially considering if we go back to 2022 at the beginning of the war, what the situation was. So witnessing on the one hand an attempt of sea control by Russia, and on the other hand having Ukraine with sea denial, an attempt. It's been interesting to see how things have evolved over time. When we talk about Ukraine or we hear news about Ukraine, you seldom hear facts related to naval warfare unless it is related to commercial ships being struck by mines, or everything still in the realm of commerce and trades. Whereas it's like the sea, especially the Black Sea, but not only that, if we think about the Baltics, the sea has been one of the main field of confrontation, not only between Russia and Ukraine, but also Russia and NATO, together with air. So that's a very important topic, in my opinion. To go back to the initial point, at first we had this situation of sea control versus sea denial, but again, the sea has played an important role if we think about what happened with the episode of Snake Island, or the sunk of the Moskva. So those are very significant occurrences during the timeline of the war between Ukraine and Russia. So starting from that, I think that if we look and try to analyze and see pros and cons of this ceasefire from both sides, if we look at Russians, the Black Sea has been an important element for them in terms of being able to fire cruise missiles, especially, not only with their corvettes and frigates, the Black Sea-based ones, but also with submarines, at the Kilo class in this case, and the improved Kilo class submarines, very capable submarines that are able to fire, for example, the Caliber missile. And that has been, especially the submarine dimension, a very tough element to counter for Ukraine, because obviously they lack a submarine force. As I discussed earlier today, the anti-submarine warfare effort is a very wide one, and you need a network approach that doesn't only involve having a frigate with a sonar, another submarine, or something like that. It's all these assets working together to counter the threat. And obviously Ukraine didn't have and doesn't have submarines. The Navy, in terms of surface combatants, has been basically destroyed at the beginning of the war. They don't have MPAs, and the only eyes they have in the air come from drones or the intelligence support provided by the Allies and by NATO countries, the US especially. So the only measure in place today that they had to limit the kind of presence of submarines in their water was the usage of mines. But on the other hand, if we look at the Ukrainian side of things, they have been at the forefront of the development and the usage of drones and uncrewed systems, which has forced the Russians to progressively move their most valuable assets from one port to another, but at the same time not being able to protect them both from uncrewed systems, but also from the use of European-made cruise missiles. So if we think about the Storm Shadows supplied by UK, France and Italy, there are a number of evidence about the usage of these missiles to strike submarines that were undergoing maintenance period in dry docks, as well as other vessels. So the Russians will definitely benefit from this, and the Ukrainians as well, for different reasons. So NATO, first of all, NATO in January 2025 has launched a new initiative called Baltic Sentry, because the core of these activities that have threatened and targeted also critical national infrastructure have been in the Baltic and in the Atlantic Sea, in the Atlantic Ocean. So therefore, the main area of engagement are the main areas are those ones, and that's where NATO is trying to tackle and to take action. And this initiative, Baltic Sentry, aims to leverage the capabilities that NATO countries at the moment can deploy. For example, if we can make reference to the two new members, Sweden and Finland. They have both deployed assets as part of this. For the nature of the tasks that are required to protect and also to monitor, in this case, subsea infrastructures, assets like mine countermeasure vessels, because they most of the time can carry remotely operated vehicles, but also ocean surveying vessels or submarine recovery vessels, submarine support vessels are all ships that can host, deploy and recover systems that can be used towards this. Obviously it's a team effort, so it's crucial to have a wide engagement within NATO so that as many countries as possible are involved in this effort. And again, the development and acquisition of uncrewed systems, if we think also about Project CABOT, is directly related to this, because the persistent engagement and a persistent presence in those areas will definitely help to monitor and to prevent events like this to occur again in the future. It's definitely an area that, for the reasons we have discussed today, navies are looking at because of the needs of modern days and modern times. But again, I would stress the fact that it's a team-up approach, because traditional platforms will still be the cornerstone of modern navies. They will just be complemented by unmanned systems because of the needs and because of the threats. Navies predominantly characterized by unmanned systems, because traditional platforms will still be the cornerstone of modern navies. They will just be complemented by unmanned systems because of the needs and because of the threats that navies are facing. But I don't think absolutely submarines or frigates are going away, especially by seeing what's going on from Spain, Italy, Greece, France, Germany, the UK, Norway. They are all acquiring frigates and submarines, and this testifies the importance of those platforms. But next to it, another procurement trajectory is the one that brings the unmanned systems within the fleet as well. I think historically, and for geographical reasons as well, like the UK is a maritime country, a maritime power, before that a naval one. So, and that stresses and highlights the importance of the sea for a country like the UK. Even historically, if we think about the British Empire, everything was made possible thanks to the sea and that. So for a country like this, the Navy will always be a cornerstone for the defense, and especially considering the nuclear arsenal of the UK, so the nuclear deterrence, how it is delivered, and the fact that there's always an SSBN submarine, in this case Vanguard class. The other day they laid the keel of the first Dreadnought class SSBN, which will replace SSBN stands for nuclear powered submarine capable of launching nuclear ballistic missiles. So that's the way the Royal Navy and the UK in general delivers his nuclear deterrent. And so that's, to sum up on that side, that's That's very, very important. Within Europe and within NATO in general, lately there have been discussion about the creation of a unified armed force within Europe, continental Europe in this case with the European Union, and I don't personally see that happening. I would rather support something what you said in terms of countries specializing in areas of defense, not just because it would be nice, but because considering the threat that Europe is facing today, the technology evolution that is very rapid, and the costs, there's no European countries today that can afford to be strong at everything. So countries are already coming together, as we have discussed today, for the joint development of weapon systems, and I think that will happen at an increased pace in the future because of the reasons we have discussed in terms of costs, the burden sharing within NATO, so more investments, but it's not only about more funds and more investments, it's about how you invest the money that governments make available for the armed forces. So I definitely see an increased cooperation within Europe for the development of weapon systems and platforms that clearly for some countries, if we think about the UK, could lean a bit more on air and naval power. And we have good examples of this with GCAP, for example, teaming up with Italy and Japan. In terms of the air domain, although we are going a bit out of context, but Italy and the UK have historically had a very strong relationship with this, with the Tornado, with the Eurofighter, and now with the GCAP/Tempest initiative. So within Europe, we already have examples of this, and I think that the step forward in order to make Europe and NATO more efficient in terms of spending is not an operational one in terms of armed forces. The real step forward has to be done in the acquisition and in the development of systems, and I think, again, we have discussed that today, even with regards to unmanned systems. Countries are coming together to unify and harmonize their requirements in order to develop weapon systems that can therefore be developed and acquired jointly. And that is going to help also from an operational point of view of the armed forces, because armed forces of two different countries will end up operating the same system. So from a training perspective, an operational one, even in terms of doctrine, when you think about uncrewed systems, it's always in development. It's a learning by doing process most of the time. So having other countries using the same platform and trying to understand and explore different usage can only benefit the whole process. So the UK, as I said, has definitely a role to play in naval. In the naval side of things, air as well.